At the end of the day, we all know that we're going to leave this planet. We're going to go somewhere else, and we're going to leave behind whatever we had. Now, there's a lot of choices about how we go about leaving our assets. There are a lot of ways to leave our assets. There's a lot of recipients of our assets. What we're going to do on this segment of Consider This Program is break down the two competing parties, if you will. Do I want to trust or do I want to will? And what is the difference? Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Aaron Rheaume.
And we are happy to have you along. Thanks for taking the time to be able to be here with us today. Hey, one of the common questions that we get is, Joe, I don't really understand. You are a wealth manager. Yeah, well, I'm a certified financial planner by trade. That would be my first thing. But yeah, the Financial Enhancement Group is a registered investment advisory firm. We're blessed to take care of more than 1,100 families throughout the country, most in central Indiana right now. Mm-hmm. And we're responsible for more than $600 million at the time of this recording. Yes, we get paid to manage money. But that certified financial planner part comes out of me. And what I just cannot handle ethically is people not understanding all of the other facets of their money, not just managing a 401k or an IRA, not picking whether it's large cap or small cap, not just that. That's a big, important part, right? But what about the other aspects, what we call your life after work? Some people call it retirement. The annual tax planning, that's not tax reporting. That's the annual tax planning. Investment playbook, that's how your money ought to be managed. We do that every week, every day, if you want to know the truth for people. The fourth is the life happens. It's the good and bad and ugly of life. And last but not least is the legacy plan. And so people find it kind of curious when they walk into the Financial Enhancement Group and they see me talking about trusts or wills on a whiteboard. Yeah. I live on whiteboards. It's just kind of my thing. You know, when I taught at Purdue, I was up there for 7 years, and they moved the classes back and forth based on the size of the class, based on the semester. Mm-hmm. So one, I would have a chalkboard, which would just drive me nuts. I would walk out looking like a fat clown with a snowman suit on me. And then the other one, I had this beautiful whiteboard that I could draw on that I really wish I'd have got as a retirement
That's why
party.
They're in all of our offices.
That's why they're in every office that you'll find me in, at least anyhow. So I'm not an attorney. Yeah. Got to tell you that. Don't play one on TV. Don't play one on radio. But I'll tell you where a lot of this started. I was 16 years old when my father moved me from the metropolis of Muncie, Indiana, to Otterburn, Indiana. And this was a small farm town. You could put what I knew about farming in a Folgers coffee can. But I fell in love with these people. And they are good-hearted people. Many of them are my good friends still today. Mm-hmm. And in 1984... we lost 2 farms that year. Wow. That people had in their families for over a century in one case. Mm-hmm. And they lost it because they didn't understand the tax code. Now, I thought, first of all, I saw junior in high school. What did I know, right? I thought, first of all, everybody should know the tax code. If they had that much ground, they should know the tax code, right? Mm-hmm. And secondly, I didn't think the tax code should say that, right? So this is kind of what propelled me into this world. So, yes, we get paid to manage money. I am a certified financial planner, which means by definition, I know all 5 of those. Aaron is our director of financial planning. There's 29 people on our team. He knows all 5 of those. But the legacy plan has always been my baby, if you will. So, Aaron, if you don't mind, I'm going to walk backwards. Sure. Right? I believe in a saying that if you want to succeed, you always want to proceed with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. Right? If you wake up at the beginning of your day and you don't know what it is you want to accomplish that day, you're either retired, which is fine, or not very productive, right? Because you can wind up going in 100 different ways. You want to begin with the end in mind. I do that daily. I do it weekly. I do it quarterly. I do it annually. And yes, I have lifetime objectives. If you think I'm sick in the head, then that's fine. But always start with that end in mind. And one of the guys I listen to, another podcast that's good, and don't forget to get signed up for ours, Consider This Program. You got to put the program word in anywhere you listen to podcasts. Donald Miller talks about reading his obituary every day.
Really?
I'm not going that far. It's not going to happen. That's not the game, right? Yeah. But when you look at a legacy plan, you do want to start with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And that's what you really want to convey to the people that are going to administer it, the people that are going to receive the assets. You want to want to be able to change it as tax code changes. You want to be able to update it, do those kind of things, right? So with the legacy plan, we're talking about, do you need a will or do you need a trust, right? The legacy plan will help dictate which one of those two things you really need.
Okay.
And it's really going to come down to the transfer of assets that you have. What do you own, right? There are some people who would tell you that you need a trust to be able to reduce federal estate taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, when I need a nail to go into the wall, I need a hammer, right? It's the best tool.
Mm-hmm.
I can try it with a screwdriver and hurt myself, So trusts do not reduce estate taxes at all, but they are the best tool in many cases to be able to get that done, right? Still not a safe harbor by any stretch of the imagination. But we want to transfer those assets. The first question that you should always have is, who's going to receive the money?
Yes.
Right? Who's going to receive the stuff? If you don't know who's going to receive the stuff, you can't answer whether you need a will or trust, right? Once you figure out who you want to receive it, and remember, one of the things we talked about on this show before is all beneficiaries aren't equal, right? You may have a child who's doing wonderful things for the world but doesn't have a real high income, and another child who's just a heathen but makes all the money in the world. You may have one that has a special need issue, or a grandchild that does. You may have various different situations, and the love and care that you show each of them may be quite equal. But the asset, Aaron, that you want to transfer to them should not necessarily be the same.
Sure.
Right? Simple thing. Let's say you have $1 million in a Roth IRA and $1 million in a 401k. One is going to be fully taxed either by you or the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. One's going to be never taxed by you or the beneficiary, right? So do I leave the Roth IRA to the child in the higher tax bracket or the lower tax bracket?
The higher tax bracket.
The higher tax bracket, because they're not going to pay taxes.
Correct.
Right? So when I'm trying to equalize an estate, I have to get you to recognize that all beneficiaries are not equal, right? That doesn't mean love's different. That just means I want to pay attention to this tax code in terms of what's going on. So the legacy plan is, what do I want to transfer? That's more than just money. What do I want to leave behind? I recognize that either me or Barb are going to go first. 70% of the time, it's the guy. So that means I have to leave her behind with an idea of what's going on, my kids an idea of what's going on, my church and my community in terms of what's going on, how Aaron and my other partners are going to be able to go on with the company. This all has to be worked out. That's the legacy plan. Now, how do you begin to transfer that? That's when you get into the conversation of the will or the trust. A trust is going to give you privacy, which doesn't seem to matter to some people. Other people, it's critical, right? It's going to give you control over what happens to that money in the future, which some people care a lot about. I'm one. And some people don't care at all. But there's different strategies that you can deploy inside of a trust. Now, there are people who tell you, well, Joe, my will does that. Well, no, your will is not private by definition. That's one, because you're going to go through a process called probate, right? Number two, you don't really have control over it. Oh, no, wait, that's not true. I have a trust in my will. It's called a testamentary trust. And what that means is after you go through probate and the world sees everything that you have, then trusts are created. They're like springing to life, springing trusts that come out of play. And keep in mind, as I say this, I'm not an attorney. Don't play one on TV or radio. I work with estate planning attorneys. Our job at the Financial Enhancement Group is to help you understand your legacy plan, to figure out how to bring all of this forth, if you will, right? So then we've got all this design stuff that is done, and that's when Aaron and the team are able to come in and start talking about ownership issues and things like that. So Aaron, if I had a trust and I walked in and you got my brokerage account, right, and it had Joe and Barbara Clark on it, what would you tell me?
I would ask you why you have a trust, or why that the brokerage account wasn't titled in the trust name.
Well, what should I do?
Make sure it's funded.
So the verb of putting assets inside of your trust is called funding, right? And believe it or not, we still have people who come in who have trust. They've paid for reasonably expensive attorneys and don't have assets that are inside of them.
Correct.
Right? And so I'm a book nut. I read every day and I thoroughly enjoy it. It's part of my ritual inside of the morning. But one of my friends and I joke, it's over 75% of books that are bought are never read. and 75% of the books that are started are never finished.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating thing. But our expression is when people buy the book, they believed they also bought the time to read the book, right? And I will probably never be able to read all the books that I've bought just because I enjoy buying them and reading them as I can, right? My point is this: buying a trust does not mean you've protected your estate, provided control, or doing anything else if you don't take the next steps.
Sure.
So make sure if you're working with an estate planning attorney, or if you're working with a fiduciary like us who does financial planning on your behalf, when you're doing that, make sure that you understand what your obligations are. When you come to the Financial Enhancement Group, one of the things that we will always leave with every meeting is a next steps. Our next steps and your next steps. In fact, we call it the next steps meeting. So when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about your estate planning and what this is going to look like in your future and what happens if one of you is incapable of making your own decisions or if one of you passes away, when you're thinking about this, if you go to yourlifeafterwork.com, click on schedule a next steps meeting, we're happy to sit down with you. Aaron and our team will spend 90 minutes with you, go through the information that you have, and we'll give you, we don't believe in wasting anybody's time. We're going to give you things that you want to consider today, things that you're probably going to want to consider in the future. And if we choose to partner together, we'll give you things that we'll do for you in that next steps letter, as I said, in writing, right? Here's our promise to you based on what's going on and what's going to happen inside of the future. And I just think that's the best way to summarize whether you need a will or a trust. For the record, I have a will, but my will simply says anything that I forgot to put in my trust, please put in my trust. But my issues could be different than yours. They could be different situations. I'm not telling you which one of those you need. I'm just telling you the direction that we try to help people go through by asking you a series of questions that we think become very, very, very important in terms of where you are. Take away from this, remember, not all beneficiaries are equal, right? Wills and trusts are not the same. If you have a will, you will go through a probate. That's how that process works, right? But start with the legacy plan. Begin with the end in mind. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com or 800-928-4001. Have a wonderful week. We look forward to seeing you. 800-928-4001.